Atlantis by Eric Dubé. From the beginning of recorded history, and for thousands upon thousands of years, cultures across the entire world all believed the Earth was flat. Their various cosmologies and cosmogonies differed in slight ways, but their overall geographies and astronomies were incredibly consistent and in fact virtually identical. The Earth was a stationary plane, void of any motion or curvature, flat across its entire expanse, except of course for hills, mountains, and valleys. The North Pole was the magnetic monopole center point of the flat Earth, with Polaris, the North Pole star, situated directly above. Polaris was with all the other constellations revolving perfect circles over the Earth every night. The stars were divided into two categories, known as the fixed stars and the wandering stars. The fixed stars were so called because they were observed then, as we can observe today, to stay fixed in their constellation patterns, night after night, year after year, century after century, never changing their relative positions. The wandering stars, what are today referred to as planets, were so called because they were observed then, as we can observe today, to wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like patterns, making both forward and retrograde motions over and around the Earth during their cycle. The Sun and Moon were both of equal size, and they too revolved over and around the motionless Earth, as immortalized in Chinese yin-yang symbol. The Sun and Moon were much closer to Earth than supposed nowadays, and each shined with their own unique opposite lights, the Sun's being warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, and the Moon's light being cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and aseptic. The Sun and Moon as though connected to a magnetic maypole, made alternating spiral journeys over and around the Earth every year. The Sun began its journey at the Tropic of Capricorn, at the winter solstice, where it made its fastest and largest circle over the Earth. For the next 3 months, every day the Sun slightly narrowed its path and slowed its speed until by the spring equinox the Sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Capricorn to the equator. Then for the next 3 months, again every day, the Sun continued to slightly narrow its path and slow its speed until the summer solstice, when the Sun made its smallest, slowest circle on the Tropic of Cancer. Once the Sun reached this innermost circle, like the ribbons and dancers around the maypole, the Sun would then begin its opposing, widening, quickening journey back to the Tropic of Capricorn. For the next 3 months, every day the Sun slightly widened its path and hastened its speed until the autumnal equinox, the Sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Cancer back to the equator. Then for the next 3 months again, every day the Sun continued to slightly widen its path and hasten its speed until the winter solstice, when the Sun made its largest, fastest circle around the Tropic of Capricorn, and the annual journey began again. The Moon had a similar yearly path, revolving over and around the Earth, but unlike the Sun, which constantly changed its speed to keep a consistent 24-hour day, the Moon's speed never changed, so depending on its latitude, the Moon was observed then, as we can observe today, to take approximately 24.7 to 25 hours per cycle. This is why at different times and places during each month, we can see the Moon in the morning, afternoon, or night. This is also the origin of old fairy tales, such as The Hare and the Hedgehog, or The Tortoise and the Hare. The hare, like the Sun, begins the annual race full of energy, excitement, and ego, declaring himself the definite winner, and gets off to an immediate head start. Meanwhile, equally confident in his seemingly lesser abilities, the humble, slow, and steady Tortoise Moon begins as well, allowing the hare to win. As the race carries on, the cocky hare tires and slows down, or takes a nap, at which point the tortoise overtakes it. This is analogous to the Moon reaching the Tropic of Cancer before the Sun each year and beginning its return journey. When the hare reaches this halfway point in the race, he realizes his lackluster attitude has resulted in being overtaken by the slower tortoise and begins to speed up again. Then, for the remainder of the race, the Sun picks up speed day by day, gaining so sometimes you gotta make life easier by making it hard.
Oh,
Picks up speed day by day, gaining on the moon, ultimately losing as the slow and steady tortoise reaches the finish line before the hare and wins. So for ancient man, Earth and Polaris were the two immovable center points of the universe, around which the sun, moon, and other stars all revolve in a dome-like shape. Some cultures believe in a literal, visible, solid dome or firmament to which the fixed stars were bound. Other cultures mythologize the axis mundi as the world tree with Polaris at the center and all the other constellations forming the branches. In these flat Earth depictions, the North Pole occupied the center point. South was all straight lines extending outwards from them. East and west were not straight lines, as is assumed nowadays, but were in fact circles, just like all lines of latitude and the paths of the celestial bodies. The southern circumference of Earth was surrounded by a gigantic wall of ice, 150 to 200 feet above sea level, holding the interconnected oceans in like a warm cup. Beyond the ice wall, some cultures claimed a firm barrier existed through which no human could penetrate. Other cultures believed there were entire worlds and other civilizations existing beyond the Antarctic ice. Currently, and for the past half-century, there has existed an international Antarctic treaty preventing all independent exploration of Antarctica. Pre-approved guided tours exist which take visitors to a few coastal regions of Antarctica, but no independent exploration of the continent is allowed. Sailors like Jarl Andfoy have been caught attempting to explore Antarctica and threatened, turned around at gunpoint, fined, and jailed for violating this militarily enforced international treaty. As a result, the public currently has no way to confirm or deny the seemingly fantastical claims of ancient man concerning what may or may not exist at the southernmost extremities of the Earth. We can, however, confirm that this 200-foot ice wall surrounding the southern circumference of the Earth most certainly exists. We can confirm that Polaris is indeed the only non-moving star in the sky. The fixed stars indeed rotate perfect circles around Polaris, while remaining stuck in their relative constellations night after night, year after year, century after century. The wandering stars, or planets, do indeed wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like paths when charted from a geocentric perspective. The sun and moon are indeed observably of equal size and revolve over and around us in daily cycles. Just as the ancients observed, the sun's annual path does indeed travel from the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice to the equator at spring equinox, to the Tropic of Cancer at the summer solstice, back to the equator at autumnal equinox, and finally back to the Tropic of Cancer at winter solstice. The sun's light is indeed warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, while the moon's light is indeed cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and septic. A thermometer placed in the sun's light will always read warmer than a thermometer placed in the sun's shade, while a thermometer placed in the moon's light will always read cooler than a thermometer placed in the moon's shade. Plant and animal substances exposed to sunlight quickly dry, shrink, coagulate, and lose their tendency to decompose and putrefy, whereas plant and animal substances exposed to moonlight will quickly show symptoms of putrefaction and decay. Last but not least, just as the ancients espoused, the Earth is observably motionless to all our senses, and the horizon remains perfectly flat as far as the eye can see. Not only does the horizon remain perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, but whether at sea level, the top of Mount Everest, 35,000 feet high in an airplane, or even at over 100,000 feet high, the highest any amateur hot air balloon has ever flown, the flat horizon actually rises to the eye level of the observer all the way up. On a globular Earth, no matter how large it is assumed to be, the horizon would remain where it was, and the rising observer would have to tilt his head downwards further and further the higher they rose to see the steadily falling horizon. Many people will be shocked to know that to this day, every single scientific experiment ever devised to show the alleged motion of the Earth has failed to do so, or given evidence of the opposite, that the Earth is indeed motionless. And every attempt ever made to measure the alleged curvature of the Earth has failed to do so, or given evidence of the opposite, that the Earth is indeed flat. first person in recorded history to ever claim the Earth was anything but the flat, motionless center of the universe was a Greek mathematician and philosopher named Pythagoras of Samos around 500 BC. Interestingly enough, Pythagoras has also been touted by Freemasonic historians such as Albert Mackey, James Anderson, William Hutchinson, and William Preston as being the very first Freemason. Presented more as a thought experiment than a complete cosmology, Pythagoras posited that if the Earth were a spherical globe turning on its vertical axis once per day while revolving annually around a stationary sun, that this model could also equally explain the cyclical motions of the heavenly bodies. This heliocentric model was taught to initiates at Pythagoras' Cortona school, but never became popular or had influence outside of Greece for another 2,000 years. A century later, another Greek mathematician and philosopher named Plato also espoused a spherical Earth cosmology, except he claimed the Earth globe to be the motionless center of the universe, with the sun, moon, and stars revolving around. Its most famous student, Aristotle, also wrote about this geocentric globe-Earth cosmology in his book On the Heavens, offering three main points of evidence for his theory. Firstly, Aristotle noted that when sailing away from an observer on shore, ships approaching the horizon disappeared from view before masthead. He postulated that this occurrence was due to the curvature of the Earth. Aristotle argued that the hull disappeared first because beyond the horizon, the globe Earth curved downwards, causing the hull and eventually the masthead and entire ship to drop below the curvature. Today, easily proved that Aristotle was incorrect in his assumption by using telescopes, binoculars, and zoom cameras. Once a ship has completely disappeared beyond the horizon, modern technology allows us to zoom in and bring the entire vessel, hull and all, back into full view. This proves that ships do not disappear hull first due to the alleged curvature of the Earth, and that the horizon line is in fact merely the vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view, and not, as Aristotle supposed, the beginning of the Earth's curvature. The horizon is subjective and varies in distance depending on the weather, the observer's height, and the strength of his eyesight or instruments. As noted previously, the horizon rises to the eye of the observer no matter how high he climbs, which also proves that the horizon line is not some objective point of curvature on a convex Earth, but rather the subjective vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view. Aristotle's second point of evidence offered for his spherical Earth theory was the Earth's round shadow cast on the moon during lunar eclipses. To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the sun, Earth, and moon align in a perfect 180-degree syzygy like three billiard balls, causing the sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the moon. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the sun and moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the sun and moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the sun and moon are observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then they are not aligned in a 180-degree syzygy, and it is therefore impossible that the sun must be casting Earth's shadow on the moon, and some other explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, posited that a third celestial body known as Uranu, or the Black Sun, also existed equally.
Would you have stronger and longer lasting erections?
Good for you.
Number 1 month free.
Size to the sun and moon. This view is lessened by the light bounced from the sun and moon during solar and lunar eclipses causing their fixed head. Aristotle's final point of evidence offered for his spherical Earth theory was the appearance of Polaris and other stars to gradually decline overhead as an observer travels southwards. He argued that the gradual declination and eventual disappearance beyond the horizon of certain stars and constellations as one traveled southwards was evidence that the observer was traveling over a convex curved circle. Similar to the ships disappearing over the horizon argument, Aristotle posited that the horizon line was the literal curvature of the spherical Earth. The stars which declined and disappeared beyond it became existed between the observer and actual firmament.
Damn,
The gradual declination of objects in the sky toward the horizon is merely the law of perspective on Earth's surface. As any art student with point perspective knows, the human eye views the world in a vertical shape.
I got y'all
So
a
that
good
when
little
looking
spot.
down along the hallway, the floor
Look that
appears
shit
to
up real
rise,
quick.
the ceiling appears to sink, and the walls appear to narrow into a point at the center of the observer's view. Of course, the dimensions of the hallway remain constant for its entire length. The floor does not actually rise, the ceiling does not actually sink, nor do the walls actually close in. But to the human eye, everything is perceived this way. Similarly, when the sun, airplanes, or clouds appear to sink towards the horizon as they move away from us, they are not actually losing altitude and slowly approaching sea level. They are in fact maintaining the same altitude, except they are moving away from you, and so the perspective makes them appear to sink. A century after Aristotle, around 250 BC, yet another Greek mathematician and philosopher named Eratosthenes made his claim to fame with a new alleged proof of the spherical Earth. Eratosthenes noted that at noon during the summer solstice at Sayet, the sun cast no shadow, and the rays could reach straight to the bottom of his well. Yet meanwhile, down there, the Earth is standing at a part that casts a significant shadow. Factoring the length of the shadow with his assumed distance to the sun, Eratosthenes read a measurement of Earth's circumference close to what heliocentrist astronomers still use today. The fact of the matter is, however,
What up, Emperor Project? 313 the Great, Lord of the Mods. Yes.
Points as divergent as Sayet and Alexandria. This faulty premise led to his faulty conclusion, which was eventually exposed upon the invention of the Newton sensor.
I bet.
By measuring the sun's height at two points on Earth simultaneously and factoring their
Tearing our
distance from
ass
each other,
off.
the Pythagorean theorem reveals both the height and dimensions of the sun. Using this method, the sun and
How
moon
the
have
fuck everybody
repeatedly
up
been
here? That's why
calculated
they
to be
fucking us up.
approximately 32 miles in diameter, 3,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. High-altitude balloon footage has also filmed lighting hotspots on clouds, proving the sun to be local and acting as a spotlight, and not a burning ball of gas millions of miles away, as supposed by heliocentrists. After Eratosthenes, the globe Earth theory completely disappeared from philosophical thought and recorded history for almost 2 millennia. Geocentric flat Earth cosmologies
Learn how to
continued
shoot.
to reign supreme, with even Eratosthenes himself touted as the father of geography, depicting the Earth as flat in his
Yeah.
famous 980 map of the world. Crades of Malus invented the first model globe Earth around this time as well, but it failed to have any effect on the world at large. Fast forward to 1522 AD, Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan became the first person in known history to successfully sail around the world. This circumnavigation of Earth soon became and continues to be touted today as absolute proof of the spherical Earth theory. If Magellan was able to sail east and west around the entire world and return to its original starting point, surely the Earth cannot be flat and must be a globe, right? Just as a compass can place its center point on a flat piece of paper, trace a circle either way around, and return to its original starting point, so can a ship or plane circumnavigate a flat Earth. The only kind of circumnavigation which could not happen on a flat Earth is north-south bound, which to this day has still never been done. Both the North Pole and Antarctica are military enforced biennial zones due to restrictions originating from none other than the United Nations, the same United Nations that haughtily uses a flat Earth map in their official logo and flag. In 1543, just days before his death, Freemason and Jesuit Nicholas Copernicus published his book on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, which revived the old heliocentric cosmology of Pythagoras and began the so-called Copernican revolution away from a flat geocentric world and towards a global heliocentric one. Since his book claimed Earth to be a tilting, wobbling, spinning sphere revolving at breakneck speeds around a stationary sun, it was initially meant to be Copernicus always countered this by claiming his theories were merely hypothetical and shouldn't be considered true. In his book, he even wrote, quote, "The Pythagorean teaching was founded upon hypothesis necessary that the hypothesis should be true, or even probable. The hypothesis of the movement of the Earth is only one which is useful to explain phenomena, and it should not be considered as an absolute truth. Contemporaries of Copernicus, such as Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe, famously argued against his heliocentric model, positing that if the Earth revolved in an orbit around the Sun, the change in relative position of the stars after 6 months of orbital motion could not fail to be seen. Brahe wrote that the stars should seem to separate as we approach and come together as we recede. In actual fact, however, after millions of miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, not a single inch of parallax could be detected in the stars. As even Wikipedia notes, quote, the lack of any observable parallax was considered a fatal flaw in any non-geocentric theory. Copernicus's answer to this obvious problem was simple. He moved the stars so ridiculously far away from the Earth that even after millions of miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, no appreciable parallax could be detected. Copernicus simply needed to claim that the stars were trillions upon trillions of miles away, so then, mathematically speaking, it would indeed be impossible to detect such slight parallax. Again, contemporaries of Copernicus argued against this convenient correction of his, arguing that if the stars were trillions of miles away, there is no way we could see them. Backpedaling once again, Copernicus claimed the reason we could still see stars trillions of miles away was because they were not mere tiny points of translucent light in the night sky, but that stars were in fact gigantic gas balls millions of times larger than our sun. So first, Copernicus had to move the stars trillions of miles from Earth to
Oh,
explain away
god
the lack
damn,
of
they gonna
parallax.
spawn me in the
And he needed to
fucked
make
up
the
place.
stars billions of times larger to account for why we should see them at all from such fantastical distances. Lastly, he offered very specific instances and mathematical equations to solidify
Got shot
his
from the
theory,
front and the
claiming,
back.
for instance, that he had accurately calculated the sun's distance from Earth to be exactly 3,391,200 miles. At the turn of the 17th century,
Asshole.
Tycho Brahe, under the patronage of Emperor Rudolf II, began construction of the largest, most state-of-the-art astronomical observatory ever
Lay
built.
down right here in the
Upon
doorway,
hearing this,
face
German astronomer
Huh,
and
hold on to
Freemason
that then.
Johannes Kepler was determined to apprentice under Brahe. Even though Kepler championed Copernicus's widely disputed heliocentric full-Earth theory, Brahe begrudgingly accepted Kepler as his apprentice based on his merit as an astute astronomer and mathematician. Brahe allowed Kepler access to the observatory, but guarded his data and findings from him completely, which frustrated and angered Kepler to the point of eventually culminating in a heated argument between the two of them, resulting in Brahe kicking Kepler out. After much amends and apologizing, a year later, Brahe finally forgave Kepler and accepted him back as apprentice. This time, however, Kepler was not content with his role as mere apprentice, and soon proposed and
We gotta
secured a
surround it.
position on Brahe.
At first, yes, he said nobody should be wearing an indenture.
I don't see me wearing dentures at all. How about that? What's like right?
Project,
I
the
know.
Rudolphine Astronomical Age. Less than a month later, Tycho Brahe mysteriously dropped dead. Johannes Kepler was given access to all of Brahe's coveted data, free reign of the observatory, and became Emperor Rudolph's new official astronomer. Abundant circumstantial evidence and obvious motive have long fed speculation that Kepler actually murdered Brahe. Brahe was only 54 years old and in fine health when suddenly he became critically ill and passed away. His official cause of death was reported as a bladder infection, but subsequent autopsies of his body revealed toxic quantities of mercury present in his mustache hairs, which has led many researchers to conclude he was poisoned. The 2004 book Heavenly Intrigue suggested that Kepler had indeed murdered Brahe to gain access to his data. Kepler himself never denied this, and he actually wrote, quote, I confess that when Tycho died, I quickly took advantage of the absence and lack of circumspection of the heirs by taking the observations under my care. Perhaps useful. And so for the remainder of his life, he worked at Brahe's observatory for Brahe's employer, using Brahe's data to further his Copernican theories, which Brahe had always criticized. He modified Copernicus's calculations of celestial motions, changing them from perfect circles to irregular ellipses, and even formulated a new dated distance Sun to be 3,391,200 miles from Earth, Kepler
Oh,
showed the astronomical community that his new figure of 12,376,800 miles was the true figure. A few years later, in 1608, the first telescope was invented, and by 1609, the next champion of Copernicus, Italian astronomer, Freemason, and Jesuit Galileo Galilei, had purchased and built several of them. Galileo improved upon the telescope's design, boosting the zoom capabilities from the original 3 times up to 30 times magnification, and in 1610 made the most important alleged discovery of his career. With his 30 times zoom telescope, Galileo claimed to have seen what he described as
wow.
3 fixed stars, totally invisible by their smallness, all close to Jupiter, and lying on a straight line through it. After tracking these invisible stars for a while, and noticing they appeared sometimes above
Okay,
others,
speak good,
Galileo
couldn't it?
concluded that when he could not find them, they must be hiding behind Jupiter, and therefore they must not be invisible stars at all, but rather invisible moons orbiting Jupiter. His alleged discovery of moons orbiting Jupiter was then touted as proof of the Copernican system, claiming that Earth must be a planet like Jupiter, since both have orbiting moons. To this day, NASA claims to have special telescopes, which can, on occasion, see these moons of Jupiter, just as Galileo claimed in his day to see, on occasion, special telescopes. Nowadays,
Yeah.
with modern telescopes and technology, we can see the celestial bodies far closer and with far more clarity than Galileo could have ever. The 2016 Nikon D900 has 83 times optical zoom and 332 times digital capabilities, which put Galilean telescopes to shame. Yet, even with this level of magnification, Galileo's alleged invisible stars orbiting Jupiter are nowhere to be found. Galileo and his fellow Mason predecessors acting more like true believers of their heliocentric faith than legitimate scientists, constantly and inventing elaborate theories to support their forward conclusion. This was never more evident than when Galileo presented his theory of the cause of tides in 1616. Cardinal Bellarmine had written Galileo the year before, stating that, quote, the Copernican system could not be defended without a true physical demonstration that the sun does not circle the earth, but the earth circles the sun. Taking this to heart, Galileo hoped to show that the earth's tides were caused by the sloshing back and forth of water as a point on earth's surface sped up and slowed down due to earth's alleged rotation on axis and revolution around the sun. He argued that these hypothetical motions of his globular earth were the cause of tides, and therefore the tides themselves were proof of Earth's motion. Unfortunately for Galileo, his ideas were not accepted and easily proven wrong by his contemporaries, who rightly pointed out that if his theory were correct, there would only be one high tide per day. Not only this, but if tides were caused by Earth's alleged motion, all lakes, ponds, and other inland bodies of water should be similarly affected, yet they are not. The next champion of heliocentrism was English mathematician and astronomer, knighted Freemason and Royal Society President Sir Isaac Newton. In 1687, Newton published his famous Principia Mathematica, which presented his idea of gravity to the world. The globe Earth theory had long faced criticism for being impractical due to the natural physics of spinning spherical objects, namely that anything placed on their surface should immediately fall or fly off. How could people, buildings, and the great oceans remain perfectly stuck to a ball Earth spinning faster than the speed of sound? The globe Earth theory needed a force that could keep everything in place somehow, a force strong enough to keep the oceans stuck to the Earth, but weak enough not to sink a sailboat. A force strong enough to drag the entire atmosphere along with Earth's breakneck speed, but weak enough to allow birds and bugs to travel freely and unabated in all directions. A force so strong it could make rain fall upwards and plants grow upside down, but yet so weak that it could not be detected by any contemporary methods. Newton's postulate of, quote, an invisible force able to act over vast distances led to him being heavily criticized for, quote, introducing occult agencies into the field of science. Previous to Newton's theory of universal gravitation, the natural laws of density and buoyancy already perfectly and adequately explained the world around us. For example, the reason a balloon filled with helium rises into the sky while a balloon filled with air drops to the ground is not because Newton's mystical balloon force has an aversion to helium, but rather simply because helium is lighter and less dense than the nitrogen, oxygen, and other elements which compose the air around it, so it floats up. And conversely, a balloon filled with your carbon dioxide exhalation is heavier and denser than the air around it, so it falls down to the ground. If you blow a dandelion seed out of your hand, a substance just barely heavier than the air, it will float away and slowly but eventually fall to the ground. If you drop an anvil from your hands, something much heavier than the air, it will quickly and directly fall straight to the ground. This is not because gravity prefers anvils to dandelion seeds, but rather because it is the natural physics of buoyancy for objects less dense than the medium surrounding them to rise, while objects denser than the medium surrounding them to sink. This is the reason raindrops fall down through the air, and air bubbles rise up through the water, because of their relative densities. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the mystical force of spinning bubbles from imagination. Newton's theory allegedly began when, upon seeing an apple fall from a tree at Woolsthorpe, as though no one in the history of humanity up to that point had ever seen a falling object and wondered why it fell, he had a veritable scientific epiphany. The apple fell not because it was heavier and denser than the air around it, but rather because a force at the center of the spinning ball earth pulled it to the ground. Newton quickly got to work formulating his theory of universal gravitation, which he used to explain not only falling objects, but also orbiting celestial bodies. Newton claimed that the sun, planets and stars, gravity, caused them to orbit around the most massive nearby bodies. So not only was gravity fickle and selective about which objects it caused to fall and which it allowed to rise, it was also able to perform different functions on different scales. At the human scale, gravity allegedly caused people felt things and motions to stick to the earth, while at the planetary scale, gravity allegedly caused people to orbit around planets, and planets to orbit around stars. Unfortunately, Newton never addressed this, but the question remains, how and why would gravity cause both planets to orbit?
People dumping their $500 pressure washers for this
Oh, man.
The results speak for themselves. There's a new breakthrough in cleaning technology, and it delivers the power of professional-grade equipment at a fraction of the price. Bulky, overpriced machines are a nightmare to set up and store. But thanks to this revolutionary invention, you can supercharge your ordinary garden hose into a high-pressure cleaning beast, delivering up to 3,000 psi of blasting force. It's called Hydro Nozzle, and it's a game-changer. The crazy part is it doesn't even require
So, bitch. Did I ask you?
And people to stick to the earth. Gravity should either cause people to float around in suspended circular orbits around the earth, or it should cause the earth, moon, and planets to all be pulled and crash into the sun. The two effects are very different, but the same force is attributed to both. Furthermore, this magnetic-like attraction of massive objects gravity is reported to have can be found nowhere in the natural world. There is no example in nature of a massive sphere or any other shaped object which, by virtue of its mass alone, causes small objects to stick to or orbit around it. There is nothing on Earth massive enough that can be shown to cause even a dust bunny to stick to or orbit around it. Try spinning a wet tennis ball or any other spherical object with smaller things placed on its surface, and you will find that everything falls or flies off, and nothing sticks to or orbits around it. To claim the existence of a physical law without a single practical evidential example is hearsay, not science. By now, however, you are likely beginning to see that these Freemasonic heliocentric priests are less interested in science and truth than they are in propagating contrived evidences for their foregone conclusions. In like manner, as Copernicus had claimed positively the sun to be 3,391,200 miles away, and Kepler had calculated it to be positively 12,376,800 miles away. Newton was quoted
Like
as
you had time to
remarking,
sneak up
"It
on me or
matters
something
not
stupid.
whether we reckon it 28 or 54 million miles distant, for
Alright,
either would
okay.
do just as well." It appears he was correct, because the alleged distance to the heliocentrist's sun has continued to increase by the millions until today, where we stand with NASA's current official figure of
I
93
thought you
million
had something, huh?
miles. In
You had
1773,
something, alright.
Captain Cook became the first modern explorer known to have breached the Antarctic Circle and reached the ice barrier. This expedition offered an exciting chance to find quote-unquote because
My ass
Captain
up.
Cook intended to sail completely around Antarctica, looking for inlets through the ice wall. If the Earth was indeed a globe 25,000 miles in equatorial circumference, as the heliocentrists claimed, then a complete circumnavigation of Antarctica would be approximately 12,000 miles. And if the Earth was flat, with Antarctica surrounding the entire circumference, a complete circumnavigation of Antarctica would have to take over 50,000 miles. During 3 voyages lasting 3 years and 8 days, Captain Cook and his crew sailed a total of 60,000 miles along the Antarctic coastline, never once finding an inlet or path through or beyond the massive glacial wall. Captain Cook wrote, "The ice extended east and west far beyond the reach of our sight, while the southern half of the ocean was illuminated by rays of light which were reflected from ice to a considerable height." Later voyages by Captain James Clark Ross and Captain George Nares in the 19th century further confirmed Cook's findings. Ross's expedition spent 4 years and 5 months in heavily armored warships, failing to find an entryway beyond the southern glacial wall. And Nares spent over 3 years circumnavigating
Good
Antarctica,
throw,
taking an
baby.
admittedly
Good
enduring
throw.
course,
Damn, I should have popped his ass though, but good throw.
If anyone knew
What's
well
wrong
the
with me,
tiny
boy?
ice continent and claimed globe Earth proponents, all of these expeditions would have ended years
I
of
did.
suffering. In addition to this, many Antarctic explorers, including Captain James Clark Ross and Lieutenant Charles Wilkes, using globe Earth projection maps, wrote in their journals perplexed as they routinely found themselves out of accordance with their charts, stating that they found themselves an average of 12 to
Come on,
16
baby.
miles outside their reckoning
Come on,
every day.
baby.
Later on, further south, racing to
That
as much
was
as 29
shooting.
miles per day. These huge discrepancies experienced by explorers the further south are usually due to increasingly strong storms, winds, and currents. If that were the case, they should have just as often found themselves ahead of everything.
That is ass up.
In
Thank
1783, Ship was invented, and for the first time in recorded history, people were able to float miles above the Earth's surface
your
and
ass
see for
out.
themselves from afar whether or not the Earth was flat or a globe. To many people's astonishment, as high as they rose, the horizon remained perfectly flat 360 degrees around them and rose to the level of their eyes all the way up. Jay Glacier, in his Troubles Leading book, On Looking Over the Top of the Globe, the horizon appeared to be on level with the eye, and taking a grand view of the whole visible area beneath, was strong as great looking, almost large to one plane. It seemed infinite. And Victor Emmanuel, another familiar botanist, wrote that, quote, "Instead of the Earth declining with the view on either side, and the higher part being uneven as popularly supposed, it was the exact opposite. The lowest part, like a huge basin, being immediately under the car, and the horizon on all sides rising to the level of the eye. As stated previously, this is all because of the collapsing." Said Freeman published his theories on gravitation or scientific experiments.
Yeah, let me barely look over the step. Face ass.
The British
Shut up.
scientist Freemason, the grandson of the Duke of
It's
Devonshire,
shocking.
created an experiment which he
It's
claimed
okay.
successfully proved the existence of gravity, measured its constant, and provided
Bitch.
accurate figures for the exact size of the Earth and
What's
Sun.
wrong with that boy? Put
How
your
did
ass up on
Cavendish
there.
achieve this quantum leap from heliocentric pseudoscience? He fixed 2 large lead balls on the opposite ends of a torsion belt and hung them from the roof of his shed. By watching and recording slight motions of the contraption via telescope through his shed window so his mass would not affect the roof, Cavendish claimed to have proven correctly. 2 small lead bulbs were hung near the lower ones, and any glare turned towards one another was counted as being the influence of gravity. Now, the Cavendish experiment has been widely criticized by the scientific community because never in over 2 centuries since its creation has anyone been able to replicate it. Firstly, the balls simply do not always attract one another as they must with so gravitational constant between us and them. Sometimes the torsion balance turns towards the balls and sometimes away, as it is impossible not to give some slight less motion by returning.
Bitch.
Henry even complained in his notes how often as he was performing the measurement, the contraption was still in oscillation. Secondly, since the simulated force of gravity was 10 to the 39th power weaker than the force of electromagnetism, for which all material objects are composed, there is no control over the experiment.
thought you were
force
going to
from
beach.
the known stronger electromagnetic force. In other words, the balls could simply be attracting each other through static electricity, a known force existing in all things, billions of times stronger than gravity, and impossible to control for the experiment.
Nigga, that's weak
Even
as
though
fuck.
no one could replicate
Who
Cavendish's
gives a
finding,
fuck?
the experiment went down in history as
We're
a
all
great
gonna
success
die
and is
anyway.
still taught as veritable proof of universal gravitation in science textbooks today. Half a century later, in 1851, a French scientist named Leon Foucault performed a similar experiment to Cavendish, but this time hanging a single ball from the ceiling, swinging it, and claiming all lateral motion observed to be proof that the Earth was turning beneath the pendulum. Since Foucault's original demonstration, these pendulums have regularly been swinging in museums and exhibition halls worldwide, purporting to provide everlasting
Back your
perpetual
dumb
proof
ass up.
of the heliocentric spinning collar in theory. The truth is, however, unbeknownst to most of the duped public, that Foucault's pendulum is a failed experiment which proves nothing but how easy it is for pseudoscience to deceive the valuable masses. To begin with, Foucault's pendulums do not uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, and sometimes counterclockwise. Sometimes they fail to rotate, and sometimes they rotate far too much. Just like the Cavendish experiment, scientists who have attempted to replicate Foucault's
Well,
findings
damn.
have conceded time and again that, quote, it was difficult to avoid giving the pendulum some slight lateral bias at starting. In truth, the behavior of the pendulum actually depends on 1. The initial force beginning its swing, and 2. The ball and socket joint used, which most readily facilitates circular motion over any other. The supposed rotation of the Earth is completely inconsequential and irrelevant to the pendulum's swing. If the alleged constant rotation of the Earth
Got
affected
your ass,
pendulums in
though.
any way,
That
then there
one of
should be
y'all
no need to
bitches.
say,
I just got back
Yeah.
from Chelsea with great space.
Yeah, bro. That's so stupid. Man, they can put in the shop.
There's just so many recipes in here.
Good, bitch, use one. Stupid hoe.
continually start
Stop telling me
pendulums in
about
motion.
shit.
If the Earth's diurnal
I
rotation
yeah.
caused the 360-degree uniform diurnal rotation of pendulums, there should not exist a stationary pendulum
About to say, I
anywhere
know
on
both
Earth.
of us can't get
Also in the
smoke like that.
mid-19th
What
century,
the fuck?
another Frenchman named Gaspard Gustave Coriolis performed several experiments showing the
Bitch,
effect of
on
kinetic
my alarm
energy on
system.
rotating systems, which have ever since become mythologized as proof of the heliocentric
You
theory.
activated my
This
chat card.
Coriolis effect is often said to cause sinks in
Bitch, shut
toilet
up.
bowls in the northern hemisphere to drain spinning in one direction, while in the southern hemisphere causing them to spin the opposite way, thus providing proof of the spinning ball Earth. Once again, however, just like
Oh,
Foucault's swinging pendulums and Cavendish's hanging balls, sinks and toilets in northern and southern hemispheres do not consistently spin in any one direction. Sinks and toilets in the very same house are often found to spin opposite directions, depending entirely on
shut
the
up.
shape of the basin and the angle of the water's entry, not the supposed rotation of the
Shut up.
Earth. The Coriolis effect is also said to affect bullet trajectories and weather patterns as well, supposedly causing most storms in the northern hemisphere to rotate counterclockwise, and most storms in the southern hemisphere to rotate clockwise, to cause bullets from long-range guns to tend towards the right of the target in the northern hemisphere, and to the left in the southern hemisphere. Again, however, the same rules remain. Not every bullet and not every storm consistently displays the behavior, and therefore cannot reasonably be used as proof of anything. In the late 19th century,
Bitch.
mostly thanks to the experiments, books, and lectures of an English
Motherfucker,
inventor
runs on
named
capsule and
Dr.
shit.
Zenko, the flat Earth Renaissance began sweeping the world. Robotham's findings, beginning with his
Stupid
1864
ass.
book, started long from an experimental inquiry into the true figure of the Earth, proving it a plane without axial or orbital motion
Oh,
and the
shit.
only material form in the universe.
How y'all feel about that?
Stir in the scientific community, and thanks to 3
Y'all feel
decades of
good?
his effort, the
I do.
shape of the Earth became a hot topic of debate around the turn of the 19th century. Dr. Robotham conducted several experiments using telescopes, spirit levels, and theodolites, special precision instruments used for measuring angles in horizontal or vertical
Good
planes.
throw.
By positioning them at equal heights aimed at each other
Good
successively,
fucking throw.
he proved over and over the Earth to be perfectly flat for miles, without a single inch of curvature. In his most famous series of experiments, Robotham traveled to Cambridge, England, where there is a 20-mile canal called the Old Bedford, which passes in a straight line through the fenlands, known as the Bedford Level. The water has no interruption from locks or water gates of any kind and remains stationary, making it perfectly suitable for determining whether any amount of convexity or curvature actually exists. If we were living on a ball Earth, where every pond, lake, marsh, canal, and other large body of standing water, each part would have to comprise a slight arc or semicircle curving downwards from the central summit. If the ball Earth were truly 25,000 miles in circumference, as claimed by heliocentrists, then spherical trigonometry dictates the surface of all standing water must curve downwards an easily measurable 8 inches per mile, multiplied by the square of the distance. This means along a 6-mile channel of standing water, the Earth would have to curve 16 feet 8 inches downwards from one end to the other, and or dip 6 feet on either end from the central peak, depending where the measurement is taken. Robotham tested first by standing in the water holding a telescope 8 inches above the surface, while his partner rowed away from him in a small boat with a 5-foot-tall flag attached. If the Earth was indeed a globe 25,000 miles in circumference, by the time the boat reached Welney Bridge 6 miles away, the entire boat and flag should have been completely invisible, hidden behind a 6-foot-tall mass of curved water. In reality, however, every time tested, the entire boat and flag remained visible from start to finish. In a second experiment, Dr. Robotham placed 7 flags along the edge of the water, each 1 mile distant from the next, with their tops positioned 5 feet above the surface, and stood with his telescope behind the first. If the Earth was a globe 25,000 miles in circumference, each successive flag would have to decline a definite and determined amount below the last. The first and second flags established the line of sight. Then the third should fall 8 inches below the second, the fourth flag 32 inches below, the fifth 6 feet, the 6th 10 feet 8 inches, and the 7th flag should be a clear 16 feet 8 inches below the line of sight. Even if the Earth was a globe of 100,000 miles, an amount of easily measurable curvature should and would still be evident in this experiment. But the reality is, not a single inch of curvature was detected, and the flags all lined up perfectly as consistent with a flat plane. In 1870, one of Rowbotham's supporters, an English scientist of the Royal Academy named John Hampden, offered a public wager of £500 to anyone who thought they could prove the Earth spherical by repeating the Bedford level experiment. Fred Russell Wallace, a fellow English scientist, ardent evolutionist, and personal friend of Charles Darwin, accepted Hampden's wager, and the two met with referees to decide the matter at the Bedford level. The original plan was to repeat Rowbotham's flag experiment, but after hours of attempting to align them one on each mile marker, upon looking through the telescope, quote, they could not even judge which was which, let alone decide whether the line of sight along them was flat or curved. Heated debate ensued, an angry quarrel followed, and the experiment descended into a farce. They called it a day.
Low IDS. What up, low IDS?
This time, Wallace setting new parameters for the experiment, which had never been tested or approved by Robotham or Hampden. Wallace hung a large calico sheet from the old Bedford Bridge with a thick black line painted across its center, and positioned his telescope 6 miles south at Welney Bridge at the same elevation. And halfway between these 2 points, Wallace placed a long red pole topped with a marker disc designed to fall in line with the black painted marker and telescope. All of these he placed at a masonically significant 13 feet 3 inches above the water. Wallace's plan was to view the marker disc in black line through the telescope, and if the middle marker appeared below the line of sight, this would be taken as proof of the water's flat surface. And if the middle marker appeared above the line of sight, it would be taken as proof of
yeah, you said check them rooftops.
They took issue with this new method of allegedly determining curvature, but begrudgingly accepted.
Yep, that's what that fuck they doing. They blew my ass off one.
Fell a tiny bit below the telescope crosshair, and the far marker on the bridge fell a tiny bit below that. This result was not expected by either party.
Damn.
Wallace quickly claimed it proof that the Earth was curving downwards, while Hampden claimed the results to be in accordance with the law of perspective on flat surfaces. This time, an even more heated debate ensued, until Wallace refused to speak another word with Hampden, gave him the silent treatment, and even had the police escort Hampden from his hotel room before leaving town the following day. The referees for the wager decided in favor of Wallace, and the money was given to him. In response, Hampden immediately published a 16-page pamphlet denouncing Wallace as a liar and cheat, called Is Water Level or Inverse After All? The Bedford Canal Swindle.
Like that bitch nigga was up there on the train.
also present during the experiment, wrote his equally scathing
Go
38
ass
review
down,
of the
dude.
swing vote entitled Water Not Convex, the Earth Not a Globe, demonstrated by Alfred Russel Wallace on the 5th of March, 1870. Hampton later took Wallace to trial and sued him for his £500.
Hey, get down. Well, fucking face shoot. You gotta get your ass down.
Returned his money in full. Next, Hampton immediately emerged from his challenge of Wallace, increasing the wager to
I think I don't need to
£1,000.
see your ass.
This time, the experiment would be conducted as
Stupid
Rowbotham
bitch,
had
you.
originally done, standing in the water with the telescope held 8 inches above the water, observing a
I was
boat
about to
with
say,
a
don't be
5-foot
running up.
flag attached and sailing 6 miles away from the
Startled
land
me.
to Wilmington Bridge. When the day of the wager came, poor weather prevented them from completing the experiment,
Yo,
so
nigga,
they
you ain't got
postponed
no ammo.
and better weather postponed again.
Uh-uh.
On their third and final attempt, before heading home with the
Uh-uh.
weather still overcast, they attempted
What
the
you got?
experiment. Unfortunately, shortly after reaching land safely, the boat
Get
became
your ass. Let me get this
indistinguishable
weed
beyond the
gun.
haze. The band was halted. The boat and flag were
Yeah.
visible on power for the entire 3
Turn that
miles.
nigga into a
In
sack.
2015, a group of flat earthers once again repeated Rowbotham's experiment at the Bedford level, with similar results. They
Smoke him if you got him, they said.
Sometimes you gotta make life easier by making it harder. Thank you, Buchu. Detective Richard and saw the boat being
Uh-oh, here's gunfire.
In 1871, after getting massive amounts of pressure from the public to address these
Fuck,
claims
nigga,
from flat earth opponents,
nigga,
the Royal
nigga, sit there and
Astronomical
let monkey
Society
shit.
president George Airy announced an experiment which he hoped would once
Got
more
him.
reverse axial
Got
motion
him.
and forever silence the normal browsing
Got
flat
him.
earthers. By first
Kind of
filling
gun
the
you had,
telescope
rat.
with water to slow down the
See
speed of
what you
light
had.
inside, then calculating the
That is
tilt
weak ass
necessary to
shit.
get the starlight directly down the tube, Airy planned to measure the speed of the telescope, and thereby the speed of the Earth, by extrapolating the amount of tilt needed to keep the starlight coming in straight. The
I want to
experiment,
go on that
however,
little
would go
rat.
down in history and
Must
forever be
have a
known
track.
as Airy's failure, because every time
Stay
he
right there.
repeated it, Airy found the starlight was
Dummy.
already coming in at the correct angle, no change
Shut up.
necessary, proving that the stars
Stuck
move
with
relative to a
somebody else.
stationary Earth and not the other way around. Airy admitted he Yosemite instead Princeton had listening
Damn.
the geocentric
You ain't watch your back though,
in
rat.
1887,
I thought I was out here by
American
myself.
physicists
Stupid
Albert
ass.
Michelson and Edward Morley performed an experiment to determine Earth's speed through space, or what was then called the ether. By passing light through 2 pathways, one in the direction of Earth's alleged motion and the other at right angles to it, the light
I
traveling
done
with the
seen the
Earth should have
motherfucker,
taken
but I
longer to
ain't
return
gone
than
now.
light traveling at right angles to it. To
Fuck.
the surprise of
Hey,
most
slam,
Morley and
nigga.
the scientific
I
establishment,
hate that little
however,
rat.
no
He
difference whatsoever
gonna
was
get best
detected,
play
even
though.
after repeating the experiment
The
several
rat
times
ass.
in different places. To attempt to patch up this glaring problem,
Yeah, stop
the
moving around so
heliocentric
good.
establishment created the Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction, which actually had the gall to claim that the light pathway going the same direction as the Earth became physically shorter during the experiment, so that the
See the
time
little
to
rat.
return became equal to the other pathway. The implications of Michelson and Morley's
And the rat was
experiment
getting
were
it
so
in though.
detrimental to the spinning globe Earth myth
Master
that they
Splinter.
were forced to concoct this ludicrous, backpedaling explanation, which even Arthur Miller denounced, calling it
Who's yours gonna
the
get that
physics of
shit?
desperation. After Samuel Rowbotham's death, Lady Elizabeth Holmes, an English author, local vegetarian and anti-vivisectionist, founded the Universal Zetetic
Had the
Society,
nigga on that
which
gas and
attracted
still pop
thousands of
mine.
members and published the journal called The Earth Not a Globe
It's
Review
all good.
for several decades.
Win some, you
Many
lose
other
some.
prominent flat earthers of the time also continued doing their best to spread the word.
But you
Joe
max your
Hampton
gun out.
continued publishing
Fuck.
his own work and reprinted all of Samuel Rowbotham's material. In 1885, William Carpenter published his famous 100 Proofs Earth is Not a Globe. In 1892, Alexander Gleason released his New Standard Map of the World as It Is, which remains to this day one of the most accurate flat Earth maps ever created. He had hopes it would completely replace globes and Mercator maps the world over, but unfortunately his map's influence was short-lived. The next year, in 1893, Gleason published his Flat Earth tome entitled Is the Bible from Heaven? Is the Earth a Globe? Does Modern Science and the Bible Agree? Which gave many flat Earth proofs and also explained his wonderful map. In 1899, South African flat Earth author Thomas Winship published his excellent work, Zetetic Cosmogony, evidence that the world is not a rotating, revolving globe, but a stationary plane circle. 1903 marked the beginning of airplane travel, which, had it been invented in Copernicus's era, would have destroyed his spinning ball Earth fantasy long before takeoff. When hot air balloons were first invented, people were told the reason they did not simply float in the air and wait for the spinning ball Earth to bring their destinations to them was because gravity somehow stuck the entire atmosphere and everything in it in place, dragging it along at 1,000 miles per hour so uniformly that we can't see it, feel it, hear it, or measure it in any way. Once airplane technology evolved so that we could fly at comparable speeds to the Earth's supposed rotation, however, it became immediately apparent that the Earth and its atmosphere could not be constantly rotating 1,000 miles per hour west to east. Simply put, if the Earth were constantly spinning eastward 1,000 miles per hour, then
I
airplanes'
take
flight
my ass
durations
a nap.
going
That's what
eastwards
I'm about to
versus
do.
westwards
I
would be
this
significantly
motherfucking
different.
game.
If the average commercial airplane
Shut up.
travels 500 miles per hour, it follows that westbound equatorial flights should reach their destination
I'm
at
gonna do this
approximately
motherfucker
3
right here.
times the speed
Fucking
of their
with.
eastbound return flight. In reality, however, the differences in east and westbound flight durations usually amount to a matter of minutes, and nothing near what would occur on a 1,000-mile-per-hour spinning ball Earth. For example, flights eastward with the alleged spin of the ball Earth from Tokyo to LA take an average of 10.5 hours. Therefore, the return flights
It's some
westward
shit.
against the alleged spin should take an average of 5.25 hours, but in actual fact, take an average of 11.5 hours. Also of note, if Earth were a globe, there are several flights in the southern hemisphere that have the quickest and straightest path over the Antarctic continent, such as Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia. Instead of taking the shortest, quickest route in a straight line over Antarctica, all such flights detour all manner of directions away from Antarctica instead, claiming the temperature's too cold for airplane travel. Considering the fact that there are plenty of flights to, from, and over Antarctica, and NASA claims to have technology keeping them in conditions far colder and far hotter than any experienced on Earth, such an excuse is clearly just an excuse, and these flights aren't made because they're impossible. If the Earth was evolved and Antarctica was too cold to fly over, the only logical way to fly from Sydney to Santiago would be a straight shot over the Pacific, staying in the southern hemisphere the entire way. Refueling could be done in New Zealand or other southern hemisphere destinations along the way if absolutely necessary. In actual fact, Santiago to Sydney
What's wrong
flights
with that boy?
go into the northern hemisphere, making stopovers at
I ain't
LAX
scared
and
of you
other North American
motherfuckers.
airports before continuing back down to the southern hemisphere. Such ridiculously wayward detours make no sense on the globe, but make perfect sense and
That's
form
what you
nearly
better
straight
do.
lines when shown on a flat Earth map. On a ball
Uh,
Earth, Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia, should be a straight shot over the Indian Ocean, with convenient refueling
well, damn.
possibilities on Mauritius or Madagascar. In actual practice, however, most
What kind
Johannesburg
of
to
gun,
Perth
special
flights
gun you
curiously
got?
stop over either in Thailand, Hong Kong, or Malaysia, all of which make no sense on the whole, but are
Fuck
completely
wrong with
understandable when mapped on a flat Earth. Casual study of other South Hemisphere flight paths and
you? Damn,
stopover
y'all
points
dummies just gonna
will
keep
prove
coming
to
out?
even the most staunch
Oh,
skeptic
damn.
the
Killed
clear
myself.
illegitimacy of globe map
Kill
projection.
myself while I let you do it.
Building on Michelson and Morley's experiment, in 1913, French physicist Georges Segnac again proved the existence of the ether and the stillness of Earth by using a beam splitter to send light in opposite directions around the path, recombining them
I
and
should
observing
shot
their
your ass in
interference
the
ranges,
face.
first
What the
while
hell was I doing?
stationary, and then while rotating the entire
Blowing
experiment equal
myself
to
up.
revolutions per second.
Sleeping, man.
The changes in interference patterns between the moving and non-moving protons
Tired,
proved that the
bro.
light, and therefore the Earth, was stationary. In
You sliding
1914,
asshole.
William Westfield wrote his geocentric classic, Does the Earth Rotate? No. And Mitchell Atkinson's masterpiece, Kings Dethroned, A History of the Evolution of Astronomy from the Time of the Roman Empire to the present day, was published in 1922. The heliocentric theory of the universe was on its last leg. In 1991, the Michelson-Gale experiment again vouched for a stationary Earth, and it was
Yeah, they
clear to the
paying our asses
establishment
up.
that they needed something big to
Oh,
bring public opinion back their way.
it is.
In
Get your ass up,
1916,
bitch.
a Jewish physicist named Albert Einstein had published his general theory of relativity,
Oh, reload,
brilliant
reload,
revision
reload,
of
reload, reload.
heliocentrism, which in one philosophical swoop abolished the ether from scientific
I
study,
don't like this
replacing
spot.
it with a form of
Damn.
relativism, which allowed for heliocentrism and geocentrism to hold equal merit. If there was no absolute etheric medium
Oh, they
within
all
which
in
all
that
things
motherfucking
exist,
room. Huh?
then hypothetically one could postulate
Stupid.
complete relativism with regard to the movement of two objects such as the Earth and Sun. In one philosophical leap, with no scientific evidence to support it, Einstein and the heliocentric establishment were thus able to sweep Airy's failure. Michelson, Morley, Sagnac, and Gale all conveniently under the carpet and pretend they didn't exist, simply by claiming that all motion in the universe.
How the liver warns us that it is overworked.
You can stop eating
Oh,
keto,
shut the
paleo,
fuck
or
up.
carnivore.
Was relative.
I didn't know he'll
By
fit
the late
some shit.
1920s, Einstein and his theories had been pushed so vehemently that heliocentric theory and Einstein was being
Get the
touted as a
gas.
genius and one of the greatest minds in history. Far from it, even he himself admitted when asked, "What is it like to be the smartest man alive?" Responded by saying, "I don't know.
Yeah.
You'll have
Oh,
to ask
y'all
the
got to be
professor."
fucking shit.
A true genius who in no way supported Einstein's relativity or the heliocentric theory. Einstein was even caught lying when he originally claimed to have never even heard of the Michelson-Morley experiment.
Got this whole ass nigga highlighted and shit like
He
he's
had
something.
indeed created special relativity with the intent of abolishing the ether and nullifying the Michelson-Morley result. By the 1930s, an eccentric
Fuck wrong with
Christian
you?
flat earther named Walter Glenn Voliva was attracting widespread publicity
Yeah.
around the world, thanks to his American lecture course
Uh-huh.
and daily radio
Yeah.
broadcasts from his personal station, which could be heard all the way to Australia. Voliva famously founded and built
Yeah.
City, Illinois, a town of 6,500 people, all of whom were Christian flat earthers. Zion City even had its own schools and churches which taught flat earth theology. In the spirit of growth on Hampton, throughout his life, Voliva offered an open-ended wager of $5,000 to anyone who thought they could disprove the flat earth. Until his death in 1942, there were no takers. After the Second World War, immigration that brought hundreds of young German rocket scientists and physicists into the United States, beginning in the late 50s employed them at NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Meanwhile, the Russian space program was also booming, and a so-called space race between America and Russia ensued. The geostationary communication satellite was first imagined
Taking this.
in a 1940 proposal by Freemason science fiction writer Arthur C.
Taking this.
Clarke, and supposedly became science fact just over a decade later. In 1957, Russia allegedly
Shot me in the
launched
back,
the
huh?
first satellite named Sputnik into low Earth orbit, followed in 1958 by
That's
America's
cool.
Explorer 1.
I need one
Nowadays,
more.
there are
I'm going
supposedly
out with
upwards of
wind
20,000
here now.
such satellites constantly orbiting the Earth. They are allegedly floating around in the thermosphere,
We
where temperatures are claimed to be upwards of 1,000 degrees. The metals used in satellites include such as aluminum, gold, and titanium.
that's the best play. Ain't had nothing to do with the objective.
1,948 and 3,034
Well, okay.
degrees respectively, all far lower than they could
Somebody do a
possibly
goofy
handle.
dance for me.
People even
Brother,
claim
you
to
got to
see
find
satellites
cover
with their
early.
naked eyes.
Nah,
This is
hell
ridiculous
nah.
considering they are so
You mean camp out somewhere?
allegedly 100 plus miles away.
I'm trying to get more camos for this weapon. I ain't really giving a fuck.
Claims to discern the shape of satellites.
To be honest
Rather
with you.
describes seeing passing moving lights, which could easily be any number of things from
Trying to
airplanes to
wind my ass
drones to
down so I
shooting
can go to
stars
fucking
or other
sleep.
unidentified flying objects. The fact that they are geostationary means they would not appear to move through the sky anyway, but rather be perpetually stuck in the exact same place all day, every day.
Every goddamn day we shoot. We do no less than goddamn
Countries like Kazakhstan, with very few cell phone
12 is
towers.
our max
If the Earth were
legally.
full with 20,000 plus satellites surrounding, such blackouts should not regularly occur in any rural countryside and deep ocean areas. Also, satellite TV dishes, which existed for years before
But them
satellites
bitches
were
add up.
supposedly invented, are almost always positioned at a 45-degree angle towards the nearest ground-based repeater tower.
Work a whole goddamn day in 2 days.
Actually picking up signals from satellites 100 plus miles in space, most TV dishes should be pointing more or less straight up to the sky. The fact that satellite dishes are never pointing straight up and almost always positioned at a 45-degree angle proves they are picking up ground-based tower signals. Before satellites, radio, television, and navigation systems like LORAN and Decca were already well established and worked fine using only ground-based technology. Nowadays, huge
This
fiber
shit
optic
again.
cables connect the internet across oceans. Gigantic cell towers triangulate GPS signals, and ionosphere propagation allows radio waves to be bounced all without the aid of the science fiction bestseller known as the satellite. Also in the late 50s, a sign maker from Dover, England, named Samuel Shenton, in the spirit of Robotham and Lady Blunt's Zetetic Society, created IFRS, the International
I
Flat
seen
Earth
that
Research
motherfucker. Where you
Society,
went?
and began giving lectures on television, in newspapers, to youth clubs and schools about our flat, motionless Earth. Shenton discovered the writings of the late 19th century flat Earth authors mentioned previously,
Motherfucker over there
and made
somewhere.
it his mission to spread the Zetetic message as far and wide as he could. With NASA's supposed satellite launches happening, people constantly questioned Shenton about satellites proving the globe Earth, to which he would always reply, "Does sailing around the Isle of Wight prove it is spherical?" When NASA claimed to have put the first man in space, Shenton said from the beginning that it was all photo and video trickery. When John Glenn supposedly orbited the world in 1963, Shenton even sent him a free IFRS membership with a personal message saying, "Okay, wise guy." Shenton knew that John Glenn, two-time U.S. Senator and one of NASA's first astronauts, was a lying Freemason, just like his heliocentric forefathers from Pythagoras to Copernicus, Kepler to Cavendish, along with most all of NASA's astronauts. Buzz Aldrin Jr. is an admitted ring-wearing, hand-sign-flashing 33rd degree Mason from Montclair Lodge number 144
Oh,
in
there
New
you go.
Jersey. Edgar Mitchell is an Order of Demolay Mason at Aresta Lodge number 29 in New Mexico. James Irwin was a Tejon Lodge number 104 member in Colorado Springs. Don Eisel was a member of the Luther B. Turner Lodge number 732 in Ohio. Gordon Cooper was a Master Mason in Carbondale Lodge number 82 in Colorado. Virgil Grissom was a Master Mason from Mitchell Lodge number 228 in Indiana. Walter Shira Jr. was a 33rd degree Mason at
Why the fuck you
Canaveral
running
Lodge
way over
number
there? Ain't
339
nothing over
in
there.
Florida. Thomas Stafford is a Mason at Western Star Lodge number
You
138
must have
in
missed the
Colorado.
shot. You didn't get shot.
Paul Weitz is from Lawrence Lodge number 708 in Pennsylvania.
Show
C.
shot the shit
Fred
out of me.
Kreinecht, the head of NASA during the Apollo program, shortly thereafter became Sovereign Grand Commander of the Council of the 33rd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of the Southern Jurisdiction. NASA astronauts Neil Armstrong, Alan Shepard, William Polk, Vance Brand,
Think
and
so?
Anthony England all had fathers who were Freemasons as well. The amount of astronauts known to be Freemasons or from Freemasonic families is astonishing. It is likely that more astronauts and people of key importance in NASA are
Where's that little
affiliated with the
bastard go?
Brotherhood as well, but not so open about
Come
their
on
membership.
up. Come on
For
up.
there to be this many Masons, members
I'm
of
in
the
here.
world's largest and oldest secret society, involved in the promotion and propagation of this globalist heliocentric doctrine from its outset to modern times,
Yeah.
should raise some serious
Ah, you
suspicion.
stupid asshole.
Before the first Apollo missions ever even cleared the launch pad, 11 NASA astronauts died in highly suspicious accidents. Gus
That's
Grissom,
fair. That's
Roger
good.
Chaffee, and Ed White were all
Let me
cremated
up,
together in
motherfucker.
an Apollo capsule fire
Try
during a
again.
completely unnecessary and
Yeah.
dangerous test where they were
Stupid ass
strapped
boy.
down and locked into a
What
100%
you had that
oxygen
made you
chamber,
think you were so
which
fucking
incinerated
special?
the three of them to death in
I ain't
seconds.
worried about it.
7 other astronauts, Ted Freeman, Charles
Put this shit
Babbitt,
right here
Elliot See., Russell Rogers, Clifton
and wait for a
Williams,
stupid
Michael
bitch to
Adams,
show their
and Robert
mug.
Lawrence died in 6
Oh,
separate
goddamn.
airplane
I wasn't watching
crashes,
that cone.
and Ed Gibbons in a car crash. 8 of
Oh
these
well.
deaths were in
Live
1967
and you
alone.
learn.
So many astronauts coincidentally dying under such
Yep.
circumstances is highly unlikely, and lends credence to the idea that these were intentional
Yeah.
hits by the Masons trying to find the right people to sell
What
their
the
hopes.
fuck's wrong with you?
The most outspoken of the fallen astronauts was
Oh,
Gus Grissom.
goddamn it.
In 1967, Grissom
Do
had
a
become
bounce back.
increasingly irritated and totally negative about
Fuck that
NASA's
shit.
chances of ever landing
That
a
shit
man
out
on
the
the
sky.
moon. He stated the odds were pretty slim, and famously
Come on.
hung a lemon
Come
on
on.
the Apollo capsule after it repeatedly failed safety testing procedures. Grissom threatened to
Bitch.
go public with some
No,
complaints
no,
about
no,
the
no,
ALEA,
no, no,
and even
no.
told his wife Betty, quote,
No,
"If
no,
there
no,
ever is a
no, no.
serious accident in the space program,
Fuck wrong with
it's
you?
likely to be me." Right after his murder,
Bitch.
government agents raided Grissom's house
Y'all had
before
it beat.
anyone had been informed about the fire or his death. They removed all his personal papers and his diary, never to be returned. From
Oh, yeah.
1969 to
You got people cooking
1970,
over here?
so
I'll tell you what my thoughts is. Why the fuck is
1942,
y'all still want
the
me to add on
Freemasons
that
and NASA
bullshit?
claimed to have landed 6
Come
of
on
their
up.
Apollo missions on the
We
moon.
got something for you.
With this ingenious deception, a bit of
Come on
rocket
up.
technology, a bunch of flying Freemasons, and photographs taken through a round window, with this one psyop, NASA managed to convince nearly everyone on Earth that they live on a spinning ball.
Yeah, they
However,
did.
in the documentary, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. You can watch official leaked NASA footage showing Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz
Aw.
Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Nicholas
Get the fuck.
Apollo
Two motherfucking sniper rounds. Don't take this nigga out.
to fake
You must got a
shots.
special vest on or something.
They communicate over audio with control in Houston about how to accurately stage the shot.
That's what you need. Oh,
How to effectively manipulate the camera to
you need
achieve
to
the
have the
desired
one.
effect.
I know, right? Oh,
Windows, except for
you
a
need to
temporary
have
facing
on
circular
special armor so you can
speed when the
survive.
camera
Oh,
turns from 7 feet away. This
bitch.
created the illusion of a ball-shaped
Bring your
dome
stupid ass
surrounded
up.
by the
Come on.
blackness of space, when in fact it was simply a roll.
I
Neil
need to
Armstrong
reload.
claimed at this point to be 20,000 miles from Earth, halfway to the moon.
Yeah, you
But when
fucked me
camera
up.
tricks were finished
Come on,
and
bro.
people
You
could
didn't see
see for
that shit.
themselves, the astronauts were
Moving too
not more
fast.
than a couple dozen miles above the Earth's surface in a high-altitude plane. These images showing
About
a
to say,
globular
fuck
world
on
being
you, bro.
became the Freemasons' most valuable tool in altering the perception of the shape
Fuck
of the
on.
Earth. Since the original so-called blue marble image, NASA has provided the public with many more pictures and videos showing a glow Earth, having favorable photographic proof that Pythagoras' 25-year-old theory was finally validated. When seen with a skeptical
Yeah.
eye, however,
Let me get
professional
that.
photo analysts have dissected several NASA images of the ball Earth and found
Oh,
undeniable computer editing. For example, images of the Earth
oh
allegedly
y'all
taken
move
from the
pretty,
moon
pretty
have
good.
proven to be copied and
That's
pasted
what's
in,
up.
as evidenced by
I
rectangular
like that.
dots found in the black background around the Earth by
How
adjusting
long?
brightness and contrast levels. If they were truly on the moon and Earth was truly a
That's
ball,
what's
there
everything.
would be no need to fake such pictures.
Shalom.
When NASA's images of the ball Earth are compared with one another, the coloration of the land and oceans and relative size of the continents are consistently so drastically
One
different from
snuck
one
by me,
another
so
as to prove beyond any reasonable doubt
it's on
that the
y'all.
pictures are all fake. NASA has many alleged photographs of the ball Earth which show several exact copy and pasted duplicate cloud patterns. Cheeky graphics artists have even placed things like faces, dragons, and the word sex into cloud patterns over various ball Earth
Yeah, they
pictures.
did.
One recent Pluto picture clearly has a picture of Disney's Pluto the dog layered into the background.
Hmm.
On a clear afternoon, during a waxing or waning moon
So
cycle,
they know
it is
motherfuckers is
possible to see
stupid.
the blue sky
You know
right
people
through
ain't
the
gonna
moon.
goddamn really look
For
into the
centuries,
shit.
stars and planets have often been seen and recorded, even for the real astronomical society, to have been seen through the moon. If the moon is translucent enough to see objects through, it cannot be the solid spherical planetoid claimed by NASA and modern astronomers. Samuel Shunton, president of IFERS, was quoted before the Apollo supposed moon landing, stating that
Bastard.
stars have been seen through the moon. The astronauts
Still
had
think
better
you're
be
tough?
ready to fight with, because there
Bring
isn't
your
anything
tough
much
ass
to
home.
live for.
Bitch. Ah.
Besides Shunton,
How the
many
hell I
others
missed
people
that
have
shot?
unequivocally
I
called
swear
out
I
the
aimed
NASA
at that
moon
nigga
landings
face.
as being a staged hoax were professional photographers. When the official NASA photographs of the moon are closely examined, it is clear that many were taken inside a studio using repetitive backgrounds, artificial lighting, wires, and cranes. Award-winning
Oh, it was
British
shocking, huh?
photographer David Percy, photo analyst
Yes.
and historian Jack White, photographer and Nexus magazine publisher Marcus Allen, and many others all put their professional reputations on the line to expose
Your
NASA
face was next. I don't know why you
photographic
think you
evidence.
special sitting up there.
None of the Apollo missions
That's
brought
because I'm
any
going out
extra
with a
studio
bang,
lighting
bitch.
with them on the lunar lander, so the sun should be the only light source on the moon. And in all pictures taken there, in that case, the light should only come from one direction, and all shadows should be cast in the opposite direction. However, in dozens of official NASA photos, there are shadows being cast out in three directions
Boring.
simultaneously, often at up to 90-degree angles, which can only be the
Boring.
result of
Three
multiple light
turtles.
sources present on the moon. Several pictures even show
I will
overhead
not.
spotlights reflecting in astronauts' helmets,
Alright,
and
it's been
multiple
real.
lens flares originating from two or more light sources. Analyzing several images from the 6 missions shows repeated background features, the exact same halos, dunes, and craters being used over and over again in supposedly